It was past dusk, but the noted archaeologist Stevenson Goldsberg pushed on, driven by the thrill of discovery. He had promised his colleagues to leave the important objects untouched until tomorrow morning, when they would all be back on the site. But the sarcophagus was now tempting Stevenson like a Pandorian box, and after a few more hours into the night, that little devil on his shoulder was winning the battle. "Just a peek. I'll put it back together perfectly, they won't notice," he reassured himself, and pushed hard to angle the stone cap. A cloud of dust covered the whole room and had undone all the brushwork of his companions and himself. As soon as it settled, he took a torch to the halo of the darkness within. "Whoa," he exclaimed, like a child amid the exploration of the darkest parts of the attic. Suddenly, the mummy within coughs a plume of dust straight into Steve's face. He stumbles back, falls, and drops the lantern. Before he could even sit and wonder if he actually got coughed on, the mummy groans. Heart pounding, sweat flowing, and gasping for air, he picks the torchlight back up, stands up, and illuminates the stone grave. The corpse's bandaged hand grips the edge with lethargic movements, and then its head and torso raise. It looks around the room, and then reaches his arm out to Stephen and moans. The archaeologist all but urinates his pants as the mummy kept trying to reach for him, and moaned louder, but then suddenly it dropped its hand and head with a grunt. It resembled a familiar gesture that's usually encountered around the morning cup of coffee. The mummy pulled himself up from its resting place, like he could have done that all this time, and walked over to the other side of the room where a beautiful urn lay. It looked at the urn and cocked his head over to Stephen, and stared at him with its dusty hand outstretched. Stephen seemed confused and stunned from the neck down. The mummy mumbled some incomprehensible ancient Egyptian words that sounded remarkably like, "Come on." He did this twice more before reaching out and grabbing the lantern from Stephen's trembling hands with another grunt of frustration. It took a minute to familiarize himself with the directional beam of the lantern, then pointed at the urn and picked up the cap. It sighed and shook its head, placing the cap back on. Then it sidestepped to face the wall behind the urn. This confused Stevenson to no end, but he finally relaxed, since the mummy was not out for murder. Questions started forming in his mind like, what was your place in society? What were your duties and how did you go about them? What are the meanings of some hieroglyphs? What was so special about that urn? And so many other unsolved mysteries, but before he could find his voice, the mummy kicked a brick in the wall and startled Stephen. "Hey, what are you—" He tried to stop it, but was too afraid to get close still. The brick pried loose and it got pulled away. Then the mummy produced a bottle and showed it off to Stevenson like some prized possession. It moaned joyfully. Then 2 clay cups came out of the same hole and the mummy poured a drink for both of them. "Oh, celebrating your return, are we?" He smiled, relaxed, and stepped over to pick up the cup. "Cheers!" The mummy also raised a cup and mumbled something in his own tongue, then took a good sip of his cup. It immediately bent over and spat out the liquid, then took a gander at the labelless bottle. It groaned, and shoved the whole bottle in Stephen's embrace. Evidently upset, it stomped back to the sarcophagus, slid in, and pulled the cap halfway over, grumbling some slurs. The noted archaeologist, Stevenson Goldsberg, was leaning against the crypt's wall with an ancient bottle propped against his chest with his left hand, a cup of vinegar in his right, and his explorer hat tilted to cover his right eye. "Nobody's going to believe me,"